Well, Bree's on, so we're just waiting on Melissa. As soon as she joins, we will get started. We'll give her another minute and she can follow through then if she's not on by then. I'm sure she'll be on shortly.
Yeah.
All right, did Melissa just join us? No. Okay. So you like
Hey everyone. Linda, did you email me the what I'm supposed to speak on with the Black History Month? Regular
Yes.
meeting?
Do you want me to resend it?
Yes, I couldn't find the. Yeah, can you resend it? Because I couldn't find what I'm supposed to say.
Will do.
All right, thank you.
All
No
right,
problem.
great. All right, so we'll get started. I'm thinking Melissa will join us here momentarily. First of all, I don't even know, is Frank resituated at this point? Frank, are you there? All right, Melissa's on, Frank's not now. Okay, let's give Frank a minute. He had to go to a different desktop, I believe. So as soon as Frank joins us, we're ready to go. You know, I should read a Valentine's poem or something. I don't have one in front of me while we're waiting. Who has a poem? Linda?
Yeah, make one up.
No.
You're a poet. We know it.
Oh, no. There's some out there somewhere, but love is simple. There used to be a cartoon. Do you remember that? Love Is, it was called?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, years ago. I had a
Oh,
friend in
yeah.
school who collected them.
With those little people on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like college years.
Jeff, my picture behind me is your Valentine's Day gift.
Yeah, it's nice. Where was that?
It's
Antietam?
Antietam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what it looked like on Saturday. It's beautiful.
Jeff, can't you start with the roses are red, violets are blue and take it from
Yeah,
there?
really.
No, I'd screw that up too. How's that? Just to make it right. So, all right, we have Frank with us. Frank, if you don't have a poem, we're going to ask you to go right into the vacant home tax.
Sure. Can everybody hear me now? Does it sound better?
Yes.
You're as good as a Verizon guy. There you go.
Okay. Well, I belong in his office then. I had to move offices. It must be the other office. Okay. All right. Give me one moment here. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Does everybody see the PowerPoint I have up? Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Council President. I have a very brief presentation this evening in regards to what's on the agenda, which is vacant property tax. I'm calling it a registration, and we'll talk about real briefly why I'm presenting it as a registration. So I only have a couple slides here just to give us a quick idea of what we're talking about this evening. In your council packet, and also send an email out over the weekend, this, I believe this topic is a result of a memo sent by Jonathan Zavala, who suggested that we take a look at a vacant property tax. And I believe everybody got a chance to take a look at that memo and his suggestion. So in this PowerPoint, I'll talk about his memo and the highlights of what he's suggesting. Also, I believe in 2008, council had a draft ordinance with vacant property registration. And I'll talk a little bit about that, what's in that ordinance, what some other cities do, and a set of recommendations how to move forward. So the topic, vacant property registration. What exactly is the goal and objective of that? Well, it's simply to protect the public health, safety, and the promotion of the general welfare of our city. So really the goal here is to encourage restoration of properties to productive use and to make sure there's minimal maintenance and safety standards. So by having this vacant property registration process, which I'll talk about a little bit further, we're able to identify these vacant properties and to be able to have a system in place to try to encourage the restoration of these properties, but mostly making sure that they're safe buildings. Now, as many of you already know, the effects of vacant properties on our community. Well, there's lower value of the surrounding properties. So if your home or business is next to a vacant property, it affects your property value. Certainly, vacant properties bring in less property tax revenue. Many times, vacant properties, there's accumulation of trash and debris. Certainly, many times there's unsafe conditions that are created, and certainly increase a risk of fire. And overall, there seems to be a potential increase in crime. So when you have all these factors in place, the vacant properties certainly, in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, contribute to the blight. So we talked briefly about, okay, what vacant properties, why we want to address them, and, some of the negative effects of it. There was a memo sent to City Council from Jonathan Zavala. I don't have a lot of background on, I just know about the memo, and I took an analysis of the memo. But so basically, what Jonathan Zavala, I believe he works for some kind of nonprofit in DC. So this is something towards some of the work that he does. So it is very kind of him and very thoughtful. They spent the time to take a look at Reading and give us some suggestions. What he's pretty much suggesting is that the city may want to consider an empty home tax. So you ask, what is that? So basically, it's a 2% tax on the assessed property of empty homes. Now, in his report, he noted that per the American Community Survey, which we've talked about this before, it's part of the census. This is the most recent census information, 2019. It identified 12% of the properties in the city of Reading, 4,018, are considered vacant per the census. Now, our staff also indicated, just to put it in perspective, out of those properties, 286 are certified as blighted. So not all vacant properties are necessarily in a blighted status, but they are vacant. Now, what the memo is suggesting.
Frank, how many were blighted of that, did you say?
286, I believe. And I don't know, Linda, if that sounds about right. I know you're on the blighted property review committee, but I have listed here per our journals about 286 roughly are certified blighted. That's the number that was provided to me. So not all 4,000 vacant properties are blighted, but most likely more than 200 are also. So when we look at this memo, and this policy memo talks about the empty home tax. As I said, it's suggesting that we put a 2% tax on the assessed property, and the goal here is to promote redevelopment of the property and generate additional revenue. So if this was implemented, this empty home tax, the city has a potential of making $6.2 million. So that's what's suggested in the memo. So the memo doesn't get into a lot of detail, but it's very thoughtful. It's an insightful memo. It really gets us to think about how to address these type of things. So the next slide, I'm going to talk about more of a registration fee approach, because the tax is something we may not be able to implement in Pennsylvania. Municipalities don't really have the ability just to implement taxes. Their taxes are created by statute. So a state statute would have to be able to allow us to do that. Also, from a public relations standpoint, when we talk about taxes, I don't think anybody equates anything positive in taxes. Even if there's a positive goal of taxes, when we use the word taxes, I think many times there's an immediate negative feel toward it. And the program that we're going to be suggesting is certainly we want to recoup costs, but the goal isn't necessary to generate revenue. This may not be a revenue generating program, but this memo from Jonathan Zavala is very insightful, though, and it really got us to think about how to proceed. So let's take a look in Pennsylvania. That's usually the best models to look at. So, sorry about that. So, all right. In 2008, to start with that, there was a city draft ordinance that was put together that Linda provided to group. So I don't remember exactly what transpired in 2008 to bring this ordinance together, but it was a very progressive ordinance for its time, because I did a lot of research, and back in 2008, there weren't many cities, if at all, that were addressing this registration fee model. Since then, a lot of cities and municipalities in Pennsylvania have adopted it. So when we take a look at the city, what was being proposed in 2008, it was basically you have to if your property was more than 45 days vacant, you were required to register the property with the city, and the public maintenance PMI office would be the one that would manage the program. Now, when you would register your vacant property, there was a fee schedule starting at $500 for the first 2 years, and it was progressive, meaning like after 2 years, it would go up to $1,000. During this registration process, the city may conduct inspections, and any revenue collected from this registration process would be able to go to the Blighted Property Review Committee, which I believe around 2008 is around when it first got implemented. So they were looking at this as a possible revenue stream to help offset costs for the Blighted Property Review Committee. So that was in 2008, and it wasn't adopted, but there was conversation. So let's take a real quick look at the city of York and Wilkes-Barre. They currently have a registration model, and this is a vacant property registration model. So in York, it's managed by the fire department because they believe they're very inspection heavy approach to this. So when you register your vacant property, the fire department runs it because they send fire inspectors to check the building for its safety. In York, the codes department, PMI, are the ones that do that in Wilkes-Barre. In York, they charge $65 fee. However, there's also an inspection fee too, so which is a few $100s depending on what kind of inspection it is. Wilkes-Barre charges a semi-annual, which I thought was interesting, a semi-annual fee of $300, which means $600 a year. Now, there are circumstances a fee could be waived if you register your vacant property. If your property is currently being meaningful rehabilitation, like something is happening and there's permits being pulled and these properties are being rehabilitated, or you're in a current sales agreement, and this is York, they have a fee waiver. So, and I believe that's probably put in there to create some flexibility. Required inspections with additional fees, that's the Wilkes-Barre model I was talking about. It requires that when you register your property, you open up the opportunity for the fire department, which is mandatory, to inspect your property. So these are the registration fee models that the city's been looking at with York and Wilkes-Barre. So the city's recommending that we look more of a fee type of thing than a tax. Because a tax, we may not be able to even implement something like that in Pennsylvania. I know Vancouver, I believe there's a city in California that has the tax, and it may work well, but they probably have the ability to be able to implement a tax. Now, lastly, is some recommendations. So the 2008 draft ordinance is a great start. I think we just have to build upon it. If council's interested in moving forward in creating such a program that requires vacant properties to be registered, certainly administration thinks it's a very good idea, and we support the idea. Some possible revisions is 45 days may be kind of a small window to get meaningful data. The property should be vacant for about a year. Just a suggestion. It's an easier baseline to work off of because 45 days, properties are constantly changing hands at times, and there could be a tenant moving out of a property and maybe vacant for 2 months in between landlord-tenant things. So we believe from a year would be a great baseline, looking at the water consumption and some other data to determine the vacancy of the property. So if you're vacant for a year, that's a good sign you may be vacant for a while. We do suggest a fee waiver program. We certainly don't want to create loopholes in the program, but we certainly want to be able to have flexibility when somebody's making meaningful rehabilitation to their property and they're actually making, pulling permits and they're fixing the property, or in the middle of a sales agreement, it only be out of a sense of fairness that the fee would be waived because the property is on its way to being rehabilitated. One of the hardest things to do is really establishing a fee schedule. So when we establish a fee schedule, we have to keep in mind it's not a revenue enhancing approach, but it takes into account the full cost of providing the service both directly and indirectly. So when you run a program like this, it does cost money to do this. So we want to establish a fee that takes into account the full cost of providing the service. So we have a third party that would come in, like we do with other fees, to help establish the fee. And lastly, and there's been some internal conversation going back and forth about this, is that when we take a look at what is our internal capacity, right? We could come up with a lot of programs. I know a lot of council people suggest there's a lot of good stuff, but what is our capacity to actually follow through with what's been recommended and been asked of us? So a program like this, and many cities have done this, is they contract with an external vendor. There are companies and services out there that actually provide this service. So this isn't unique. Other cities have used external vendors to help search for the vacant properties, because a whole process to do that, and verifying your registration. And one of the challenges is really working with lending institution-owned properties, because when properties are going, when a mortgage company or a bank actually is the sole owner because of foreclosure, for whatever reason, it's very difficult to establish actually a point of contact. So this external vendor or on our behalf would be able to establish that relationship with this lending institutions or property management companies that are out of town. I mean, most property management companies are registered in the city. It's the lending institution-owned properties that bring us the biggest challenge. So we would be able to come up with an external vendor and use the fees collected to pay for those services. So that's our recommendation. I know there's probably a lot of questions, and once again, this is a great idea. This comes in the heels of the memo sent by Jonathan Zabala that the council office has shared with the administration. And certainly it looks like there was previous conversation about this. So we're kind of picking up where we left off in 2008 for whatever reason. So that's the background. I hope that gives you some idea and some background there. We give you a little bit of recommendations. So that's pretty much the presentation. So I'm open to questions or comments.
All right, council members, just raise your hand or speak up if you have any comments in this specific topic for Frank or questions. Johanny, go ahead.
But just for the sake of understanding, like the data, and I know the data is from several years ago, right? 2019, I think, or 2018?
In regards to, I'm sorry, Council, in regards to the vacant properties?
I'm sorry. 12%. I'm just curious
Wow.
what's the actual number. I don't know if Donna asked a similar question, but what is that?
Hey, Johanny, we can't hear you for some reason. Did you lose your mic? I'm sorry, maybe it's mine. Go ahead.
How many vacant properties are there?
I'm basing off,
Agreed.
again, the information that Mr. Zabala provided was through the American Community Surveys, and that's the best information made available, and we have to work off that information. If you're asking us, because we don't have a vacant property registration property, we don't have the exact numbers either. So we're working off of that data. And also I see that the city clerk mentions, just for correction, that Act 511, everybody's seen this already, allows us to be able to tax under these circumstances. So keep in mind, that's also an option, because she's confirmed that Act 511 allows us to do some kind of empty home tax. And I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I didn't hear your whole question. I don't know if I answered your whole question. I couldn't hear.
Go ahead, Johanny.
No, and I'm sorry, Frank. Yeah, my AirPods and my headphones are doing something very bizarre right now. Can you hear me?
I can hear you really clear, yes.
No.
I can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, and I don't know if you answered the question because, again, I was having some technical difficulties. But I think I was asked, I know that Linda might have mentioned that we have 380 properties on blight, right? Which is separate, but could be similar to the vacant properties, correct? I'm wondering if there's a distinction between vacant and blight.
Yeah.
I don't know if Linda, to defer to Linda, I mean, I think I have an idea, but I don't know if somebody would have a better explanation on, certified blight are the ones that have been identified, but I don't know if somebody, Jamal or Linda, would be able to have a better definition, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, just to answer, I think it's pretty clear. There's a lot of vacant properties that are not necessarily at the level of blight, but they can quickly become that way. And I think that's part of what they're
That's
saying.
good. Yes.
You have another question, Johanny, because you done?
Yeah, yes, and then I would be interested in learning, like, how does then a vacant property become registered? Like, who would want to register a vacant property if they know they have to pay a fee? How do we enforce?
That's a good question. People usually don't call us to tell us their property is vacant. Unless they get a trash bill and they don't want it, or recycling bill, then they say their property is vacant, they're not using the service. That's one of the benefits of having a third party, because a third party vendor will be able to go through our records and go through all our property parcels. And I would imagine one of the things they would look at is probably water consumption. It's usually a good indicator of what activities happening in the property. And I imagine they have a checklist, and then they would establish that most likely this property is vacant. Then a notice would be sent out to the property or the property owner of record. And then there'd be a process to follow up anywhere with a physical inspection to determine if it's vacant. So the truth is, we would have to go and identify these. It's very unlikely we would get an enormous amount of people calling us to let us know. So a third party is important because they'll be able to get into the databases, establish using criteria, and then we would, pretty much put the person on notice, because if you don't register the property, there is a penalty like anything else, and there'll be a fine structure built in the ordinance for failure to comply. And believe me, it's a lot cheaper to comply than it is to get the fine. And that approach.
Was that it, Johnny?
Yes, I'm sure we will continue to flush this out. Thank you.
Okay. I had Bree next and then Donna. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bree.
Frank, how much
Yes.
how much does it cost for like the audit or the third party to go around the city and do this?
That's a very good question. So what we would do is something like this. This is a professional service, right? So we just wouldn't pick any company. We would put an RFP out, request for proposal, or RFQ actually, or request for qualifications. So we would ask for different companies for different proposals to evaluate different proposals. And whatever the cost would be for this type of audit, that's where the user fee probably starts getting established, because we want this to be at least cost neutral to implement this program. So whatever XYZ amount of dollars would cost for this third party, it would be passed on through the user fee. And but that's a good question. And I'll tell you, I don't have a ballpark figure on really because we haven't put any previous bids out there. So that's a very good question. That's something we would go through the purchasing process, and then it would have to come to council for full approval. So we couldn't just unilaterally, administration sign off on it. You would have the council have the full ability to be able to review what we're recommending, and then you would make the final approval on this whole process with the contractor and fees.
One last question. Will it be your office that oversees this project?
Well, ultimately, the managing director's office should oversee everything, right? But ultimately, specifically, what's been suggested in other city models is the codes office, PMI, the property maintenance, because most likely they're going to be needed to be part of this process. Because if somebody has to go out for a physical inspection, I would imagine there has to be some coordination with the PMI office. I did mention in the presentation, some departments use the fire department, but I believe the way our fire department is set up, I don't know, we have really a lot of fire inspectors for this type of work. So the recommendation is, what your question you're asking is, probably have the public property maintenance division be the one that would be able to assist this third party contractor, with obviously the managing director being responsible overall for everything, right?
And I do have one last comment for you, Frank. We said that we weren't sure if there was how a vacancy tax would look like, or if that's something that the city can implement. I believe that's something that we can implement as a city. I know that Harrisburg has something similar with their libraries, a dedicated library tax.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how well that would go over with the public, but as far as if we can implement it, I just want to comment that I'm sure that that's something that the city can implement.
And thank you, because the council clerk mentioned in our group chat through her quick research that the Act 511, that gives the city abilities to levy certain taxes, that apparently in that list of taxes, this is something that we can do. So I stand corrected. I wasn't sure, but you could take the tax approach also. That's allowed under Act 511. So that's a policy decision that would have to be made, but a tax could also be implemented. It's a little bit more complicated as putting assessment on property values, but certainly can be done, and it's permissible.
All right, Bree, thank you.
Oh.
We'll go to Donna.
just so everybody's,
Oh.
Linda just posted that Act 511 doesn't permit that. Okay.
So I misread. I think she was referring to the library tax. I'm sorry. There's a lot of email stuff. So Act 511 does not allow a vacant property tax. And if it doesn't allow it, would it be fair to say it's unlikely we can unilaterally enact a tax because that's a statute the state would have to give us. So I'm just looking, yeah. So thank you, Donna. I stand corrected again.
So you need to look more at the registration concept.
That's why
Tax,
I
right,
don't see any other municipality doing the tax,
Right.
right? Yes.
Right, so it's semantics, but it still works. Just a couple of things. One, that the American Community Survey, the 2019 census effort, that's probably a lot more accurate than the 2020, which doesn't go into properties per se, but the American Community Survey, which is done every few years outside of the decennial census, is usually a pretty good arbiter of things. And it's not perfect, but I think it's somewhat trustworthy, and you certainly can match up what our figures are versus the census figures for the vacant properties. And then, of course, and Linda can speak in more detail about it, but there's at least half a dozen criteria that defines blighted versus simply vacant. So there's a strong distinction there between the two. I think, number one, thanks to Jonathan Spall for this, because I think this is a great suggestion. I'm glad it was once thought about. I'm not sure what happened in 2008, but it's great to see that it's surfacing again. And I like the concept of it being cost neutral once everything is analyzed, and how we're going to implement something like this. I do think it's very important, because we all know how one or two vacant properties in a block or in a neighborhood can start destroying the entire neighborhood, both from structural problems if you're in the middle of a row and you're impacted by that particular house, or just anywhere in any place, from commercial buildings to residences. Would there be a separate category for commercial buildings? Because often they're much larger. I mean, could you have a certain percent for commercial versus residential as you look to this registration and this fee levy?
That's a very good question. As we go further into this, because this is something that came new, we can look at it at that. And you bring up a good point, because a lot of cities seem to focus on the vacant homes, because the commercial property is a whole different approach that we may have to take. So if there's a thought of trying to move forward with this, if this is a policy we want to pursue, we can do some more research and differentiate between what the regular homes and residential, I should say, the residential properties and the commercial properties, and differentiate both and see what approaches we could take. We could certainly flesh that out.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good, because some of these huge commercial properties have been so detrimental to, I mean, we saw what happened long ago with the Moss Street fire, later on with the Latisse fire. We see what happens with these particular huge commercial properties that are let go, or speculators sit on them. Just one other quick question, then I'm done. You talked about in New York and others, where there can be a waiver for properties being rehabbed, and if there is a current sales agreement. If there are other waiver criteria that are determined, who okays the waiver? I want to just make sure that however we frame this, it is incredibly and importantly apolitical, that friends of friends don't get waived, because we all know the history of the city. And I just want to make sure going forward that becomes extremely apolitical and entirely objective.
That's a very good question. That's why I think a third party involved in this, that they can also be part of the waiver process, because they would be removed from, internal workings. And that's why, so they will be able to validate if the property deserves a waiver, and they would issue that waiver under the criteria that we approved. So I would say that would be the approach we would take with the waiver program.
All right, additional comments? Anyone?
Yeah, Jeff, this is Marcia.
Yep.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, council mates, for all the good questions, and thank you, Frank, and of course to Mr. Zwala. This is really pertinent in that our city can flounder if we don't take care of the vacant properties. And when you looked at the data sets, when you talked about the census, there's another real good data set. It's the fire department. They're aware of the buildings that are vacant, that they consider dangerous for firemen to enter. And so it would be interesting to look at what they have in their database and be able to prioritize those and being able to decide what properties need to be addressed. I know for myself, I have a vacant property catty corner from my house. It's been that way probably for at least 8 years, been on the blighted list. The owner has no interest in doing anything. So eventually it's going to catch on fire. And I think that if we don't act on this, we're going to be costing the city more money. This is actually a cost savings because it saves the idea of the fire department having to respond. It improves the value of the neighborhoods. So we need to line up all those components that will make this work, figure out how we can be looking at the fees and not be afraid of this. Because the people that are abandoning these properties aren't afraid of abandoning the properties. They're doing that because it saves them money. They don't have to invest. So we need to be able to take the same kind of strong approach and say, we're trying to save the city. Let's move ahead and not let folks just feel that they can have a property, walk away from it, not do anything about it, and then let the city figure out what needs to happen. And that's some attitudes of some people when they walk away. Well, the city will eventually take care of it. So I look forward to having this real fleshed out, and then we can, move forward.
All right, anybody else? I have a few comments if nobody else. So, yeah, I'm just a believer that I really wasn't. I know on the surface it sounds like the goal of this is to get abandoned properties, unabandoned. But I just don't. I don't like the idea of kind of a standalone solution to something we need a really comprehensive solution for. And we, many years ago we put $1 million aside in an enterprise fund. The goal was to get 20, 30 properties a year back on the tax rolls. And, not every empty property obviously is an abandoned property or a blighted property, but there certainly are some. The other argument is there are lots of occupied properties in the city that are bringing down neighborhoods just as bad as some empty ones. And I think that needs to be noted. If somebody's paying their taxes and they're keeping their property, whether it's empty or not, up to speed, according to all the other codes guidelines within the city, I don't know that they should be, penalized. And furthermore, if they're not paying their taxes and they're not keeping their property up to code, then they should be handled through the appropriate channels that we already have in place. So I'm not saying that this couldn't be a part of a bigger comprehensive solution, which made sense, but sometimes we create more work. And instead of getting better at the core stuff we should be doing, we create more things and it causes even more noise and things we have to think about and regulate and monitor. The whole fact of having an outside vendor, just making money and tracking down empty properties, throwing, these bills out to people, then mitigating the ones that were honestly just empty and not. I mean, there's just so many circumstances. I would rather see us, deal with the root problems so that we can eliminate, and Linda and I have talked about this with the blighted property whole process. The idea is to remedy those properties, but we can't remedy them if we don't have enough deterrents up front to stop them from happening to begin with. And, you could end up having, especially in Reading, an even more detrimental effect with something like this. We're having even more people walk away from properties or just not acquire them to begin with. And even if they do, our process has to be whole enough that says, okay, new property owner, here's our expectations when you own a property in the city of Reading. Here's our codes, here's our, tax guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. If we can master some of the things we already have, we can start reducing, we'll never eliminate, but greatly reducing the amount of blighted properties. And again, there are a lot of occupied properties in the city of Reading that we can do a better job on and make the neighborhoods better. So I just have this position, and I'd like to see us have a comprehensive housing program that deals with empty houses in the city, especially with the blighted properties. Again, that's why we put the $1 million away a couple of years ago. The hope was to do that every year. I'm just not one that's buying into a standalone solution. I know it's only It's not aimed to solve the problem. It's aimed to, help mediate it a little bit. But I'd rather see it be joined along with everything else in the comprehensive plan. So I don't know if I made any sense whatsoever, but those are my thoughts. Any additional comments?
I have a question
Yeah, Melissa, go
real
ahead.
quick. Hi, Frank. I think you probably answered this, but what was the point of registering a property?
That's a good question. The purpose of registering the property is, first of all, it helps us identify that the property is vacant. Now it's on the city's radar. So what we could require is an immediate safety inspection to make sure that the property is safe, that it's not in danger of having any unsafe conditions. Also, it allows us to begin the communication process so the property doesn't slide into a blighted situation. So we're trying to be proactive to fight blight by trying to identify properties before it becomes to a situation where you have to demolish it. And that's sometimes what happens to vacant properties when they go unnoticed for a long time. So this registration process, Councilwoman, will help us identify the specific address, develop a record of how we approach it, and try to be as proactive as possible so it doesn't slide into a blighted status where then it's beyond repair, where the property would have to be demolished. But and then the other thing is it also keeps the owner aware of encouraging the owner of the property to do something with the property, not keep it vacant. The financial incentive to keep it vacant may be less if they have to pay a registration fee, inspection fees, and this is all done under the guise for public safety. Because vacant properties could potentially, not all of them, but could potentially be a public safety issue.
Okay, so that's going to be tough to actually have people register,
Well,
basically.
you bring up a good point. No, people most unlikely will come to us. So fair enough. So what we thought about the possibility, there's third parties, there's companies and consultants that actually do this in other cities. Well, they will help identify these properties on our behalf, and we'll reach out to them to have them register into the program. So we have to be proactive. We have to search and look for them. It's very unlikely they'll call us to register.
Thank you.
All right, and Jamal, before you go, I just, that was part of my concern, I just wanted to mention, because, we're already out in these neighborhoods. Most of these properties we can identify on our own. And I don't know that we've mastered yet. We know we haven't. We don't even have a back end plan for the blighted properties that we already have. So that's my concern. Another overlay on an overlay we've already got. I forget how many we have in codes, but we have a lot of codes officers that see. When I go on walks, I see lots of properties that have been vacant for a while, or I can tell they just recently went vacant, and it's not that hard to do. It's just, what do we do with them? Jamal, I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Mr. Council President. I just would like to add on and expand to the response that Frank offered about the third party. Third parties, professional companies, they usually get their information from different sources. So, like, for instance, they have contacts with police departments, fire departments, and they have contacts with the counties and many others, such as real estate agents. So their feed in is multiple areas in which we will be able to identify these vacant properties. But one of the important things about registering the vacant properties is providing us with the contact information, because in a very short period of time, a vacant property can be in good conditions, but the grass is growing and the trash is accumulating in there. So we would be able to contact the property owner or the property representative to be able to address with them the quality of life. And that is a very important thing that we need to stay on top of it. Otherwise, all these vacant properties will take a turn to the worse with the quality of life altogether. But I would like to add that to it. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have any comments on this specific topic? All right, if not, thank you, Frank.
Yeah. Sorry, Fred.
Go ahead, Bree.
Sorry, Frank.
Go ahead, Bree.
Sorry, Jeff. Oh God, I'm sorry. I just got off of work. We mentioned, having someone from Reading instead of having a third party. So I'm just recommending that maybe that's something that I heard Frank mention the maintenance department. And Jeff, you just said that that we pretty much know which houses are in the community. So I mean, it would make sense to have maybe the maintenance department, if we have money lying around, to just have them go about confirming which houses are blighted. And I know this is going to take a little bit more, but I just wanted to throw out, we would have the maintenance department do that. I just something.
Yeah, and Brianna, I was referring to codes. The codes are already out in the neighborhoods. You know, they may not be in every block every day, but you know, we do have enough eyes out there to see what's out there. You know, part of the process, and I know Jamal, you and I have discussed this previously, is maybe improving, you know, the person in a lot of apartment buildings in the city that are filled, that we have a contact person for. In some cases, we may not, in case there are problems. I would think that would be the case for all properties, you know, abandoned or not. So, yeah, but Brianna, I was referring to codes. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I
The
think
property maintenance division, when I said, Councilman, when I meant the property maintenance division, that's, we call them codes, we interchange PMI and codes. So it's kind of, for this conversation, it's the same thing. And the last thing I'll mention is, even if a third party is involved, it doesn't substitute the involvement of the property maintenance division. Their involvement would be critical regardless. So the third party wouldn't replace what we would need from the inspector. So, but point well taken. I'm taking a lot of notes here. And if it's something that the body's interested in for us, the administration, to look into it further, we can come back with more details if that's what, if everybody's interested in that.
All right. Any other comments, anyone? All right. Thank you, Frank. We're going to move on to the next item on our committee of the whole agenda, and I believe that's the agenda review. Let's double check. Yep. So let's take a moment to go through tonight's agenda. We do have a lot of items, but a lot of it's kind of it's a lot of the appointments and stuff like that we're going to be able to do in mass. Right. So we have. Two public speakers this evening, correct, Linda?
Correct. We have a written comment that I distributed earlier.
Oh, one's written and one's live?
No, both are written.
Oh, you told me you had one that we distributed earlier. Have both been distributed?
I'll send it again.
Yeah.
Okay, and who's going to read those onto the record?
Donna will.
Donna, you all right with that?
Raise your hand.
Okay, good. I didn't see that. I was looking at the agenda. Okay. All right. And then we'll go on to proclamations and presentations. Wesley is going to be reading the proclamation recognizing Black History Month. And then we're going to go, well, then we go into public comment. I'm sorry. So we'll do that first. Then we'll go to public comment. Then the approval of the agenda and minutes. Of course, that includes the consent agenda legislation. I'm going to read each of these items. The first one's an award of contract authorizing the purchase of 5 interview room camera system upgrades for the current system that has reached its end of its life cycle from Signalscape Inc. in Cary, North Carolina. This is a GSA Federal Supply Service at the cost of $39,644.99. I'm assuming this is for the police department. Does anybody have any comments or questions about that specific award of contract? All right. The next item on the consent agenda is a resolution adopting and submitting to the DEP.
Excuse me, Council President.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had my hands up for
Sorry.
award of contract.
Yep. Go ahead, Johanny.
Yeah, this amount has already been allocated in our budget, correct?
It says so in the capital budget,
The camera
yes.
system,
Yeah.
was okay, and then do we project that this system will last us about another 10 years, just like the previous one?
Yes, that's what we're anticipating, that we would get about the same life cycle out of it, but possibly more because we're getting a little bit larger servers to go along with it, so that hopefully the servers last longer than the current ones.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, I'm gonna read through the next 5, 6 resolutions, since they're all related to sewage facilities, and anybody has any questions about any specific one can ask when I'm done. The first one is adopting and submitting to the DEP for its approval of sewage facilities, Scott Street, for Scott Street. The next one's for 916 North 9th Street. And the next one's for 234 North 4th Street. The next one's 650 Spring Street. The next one is 1700 and 1716 North 12th Street. And then the last one is 1010 Elm Street. And you can see each one references pretty much their specific use, other than Scott Street or North 9th Street. I'm not sure what that must be for the fire station. But the others are for the Supernaturals Market. They're on 4th and Elm. The other one is for, it's a delivery service is what I'm being told, at 650 Spring Street. And the other one is obviously for Albright College. Anybody have any questions or comments? And then I'm sorry, the final one's for a daycare. Anybody have any questions and comments? I guess, typically if we're making changes or we have construction and we have to change the sewer structure of the city, we have to get approval. Did anybody from the administration want to speak to that, or does anybody from council have any questions about that issue? All right.
Jeff, this is Marcia, just a comment.
Yep.
And it has to do with just understanding what all this means. And I think it has to come at some type of educational program, maybe as we get a tour through the newly built sewage treatment plant, that we just all get like a 101 sewage education, because it's incredible. The city's responsibility to this is just enormous. And we don't talk about it a whole lot, but I think it's just really important. For me, it was a great learning curve when I went out to the sewage treatment plant and learned about the operations. Now we have a new one ready to open. So just a suggestion.
All right. Any other comments? All right. If not, we'll move on to the next item on the consent agenda. It's authorizing the solicitor to execute the forms to approve the repository bid for 631 South 17th and a half Street. Any comments on that specific resolution?
And this is Marcia again. I walked up to look at it. It's in my district. I'm okay with it, but everyone else can decide.
All right. If there are no other comments on that specific resolution, I'll move on to the next item. It's a award of contract to Laura Reppert of MSH Productions LLC at $2,500 per month to plan and organize the city's 275th anniversary celebration for a 2-year period. Don, do you want to make a comment before we open up to questions?
Sure. This was an advertised position. Laura was one of the candidates who came forward. A committee interviewed her. She will be working, she owns the LLC, so she'll be working as in the contract with the LLC. She brings to the table amazing ideas for the 275th, which actually we will have the initial unveiling of a lot of some basic information, major information, coming up in mid-March. She is also has strong background here in the city. She's a city native. She worked with DID. She organized the Reading 120, was a major organizer of that. Her particular company organizes the Doylestown Bike Race and some other activities down there. She is a familiar face at City Hall, as she has actually decorated City Hall for the holidays in past administrations. She's bilingual, which is very important for this particular position. And she has already hit the ground running, working even before this contract was finalized. One other thing, to remove any inclination or any thought of politics from this, there's also been, thanks to Frank, Maria, and Linda, an account set up with the Berks County Community Foundation. And I don't know if Frank or Linda wants to speak more to that in terms of how we're going to interact with that, or Maria. But that, again, you know, we want this to be a really great celebration. We think revenue will be raised for private businesses, for the city, for different nonprofits because of this particular celebration. But we want to make sure that all the monies and all the accounts are not privy to any political winds that might breeze through in the next few years. So if somebody wants to talk about the Community Foundation thing real quick, I know this is just about Laura, but just to supplement it. Maria, Frank?
Sure. Yes. It was decided by the committee to have to open an account with the 501c, which is a nonprofit organization. So I came out with the idea of Berks County Community Foundation. Everybody agrees, so I contacted them, and you know, they very pleasant. They say yes right away. They just gonna set up a fund for the 275 anniversary. So I believe the fund is already it's up and running, and we take it from there. And they're gonna be taking care of all the invoices that has to be paid, or the revenues coming in. The city is not going to be removed at all. So that's right. We decided to go with Berks County Community Foundation. They did it in the past. They more than welcome to do it again. So thank you to them, and to Frankie, who has been very helpful. Linda, Frank, all of us, have always hand on that, and Dan as well. So thank you, everyone.
And one good thing about this as well, just to end this conversation quickly, if there are any residual funds left over after the 275th concludes, that money will stay to help with future anniversary celebrations for the city. So this will be an ongoing account working through the Community Foundation. Linda, do you want to add anything? Linda will be, through the council office, the immediate supervisor for Laura, working with her directly as well. Do you want to add anything, Linda?
Nope, you covered it. And Maria, thank you.
Okay, additional comments on this item, anyone? Marcia?
Just to be able to say, I strongly support Laura. She's already knows what needs to be done here, and I attended meetings very well prepared, and trying to bring back, as part of the 275th, some of the real strong events that have been part of the city that for some all different reasons fell by the wayside. So I think what you're going to see is the 275th is going to be a resurgence of a lot of activities that we all felt were good for the city, and especially around the tourism side of it. So I was just really pleased by what I heard when I attended the meetings.
Okay, thank you. Johanny?
For the sentiment of both Donna and Marcia. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
I think Laura's phenomenal, and she's amazing. She takes initiative. She's a go-getter. She gets it, and I love that she's not afraid to get dirty, get her hands into getting things happen. So I support Laura. My question is more about oversight and management. So I understand that the Community Foundation will be monitoring invoices, making out the payments. Is that correct?
That's correct. Also, Maria and Linda. Maria is the key person for signing off, correct? Maria and Linda will be working with her. So Maria is the perfect person for the oversight here, being the city auditor. Am I right, Maria?
That's correct. And any invoice that need to be paid will be sent to me. I will review it and sign it. And Linda, we also sign, and then we will send it to Berks County Community Foundation. They will disperse the money to whoever they have to pay, whoever need to be paid. So, and any money left at the end of the two, at the end of that the anniversary, it will be kept at the fund, as Donna mentioned, and that money could be used for future anniversary of the city.
And a great thing, there will be a paper trail. Jahani, I know that's really important to you. We've talked about that many times, Marcia. There'll be a paper trail that people can see how the money is raised and spent and all that. So be very transparent.
All right, thank you.
And for what the money, I mean, we paid an invoice, it had to say for what it is. I mean, we just want to pay invoice just to pay. So we have to be familiar for what that invoice, the purchase for what it was.
Go ahead, Johanny.
Committee will be, responsible for like oversight in terms of intended outcomes, events. I just want to make sure that we provide the necessary support for her to be successful. All the events.
Absolutely. And we're looking not only for the city to be the key, the key driver of this, but we welcome partners who across the board. We want this to be every bit as inclusive as it can be. The youth are going to play a major role in this. So Wes and the folks with the Youth Commission, this is just going to be an overall real inclusive, joyful celebration of the city and why people chose to make this city their home. So I think Laura's a great cheerleader to coordinate everything, but anyone, ideas, whatever, go to Laura, come to any of us. It's going to be we need a happy year in the city. So we'll make it happen.
Thank you, Donna. Any additional comments on this issue? Okay. All right, let's move on to the next item. The next item is a bunch of, let me just make sure I'm saying this. No, I'm sorry. The next item is an award of contract to Kentech Consulting, Inc. They provide services which include checks of social media content, online content posted by individuals at a cost of $50 per applicant. They are specifically tailored to law enforcement and currently provide services for federal, state, and local agencies all across the United States. And I think my understanding is that the scope of this is just related to the hiring of police officers. I don't know if the chief can speak a little more to that real quickly.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed, I was going through background investigations when we hire police officers, is that it was, for a number of reasons, it was really difficult for us to get a good grasp on the social media footprint of the individuals that we were hiring. In today's day and age, there's a lot of information out there on social media. So our internal affairs lieutenant did a lot of digging into this, met with an individual from Baltimore Police Department who had worked with the Department of Justice with this agency or this company to do these background investigations. What would cost us several $100s to have our criminal investigators do these social media inquiries. We pay them a $50 fee. They take a deep dive into the social media of the individuals we're looking to hire and then issue a report to us. So it's much needed, especially in this day and age. And it is a very economical way for us to do that, a very thorough way for us to do that. This is coming out of the remaining funds from our benchmark program in the budget, which is our kind of our HR program for the police department that tracks discipline and use of force and all those types of things. So it's already funded, and it only depends on how many folks that we run through the program is what the cost is.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Johanny.
Average, like how much are we projecting to spend, just so that we keep that in mind as, for future budget years?
Yes, good question. I mean, this is something that we would look to put as a regular line in the budget. We typically will do, I would say, definitely under 100 background investigations a year. Probably when we're doing two lists, I would say closer to the 60. So it's not a huge expense, and certainly a lot less than we would pay our investigators to do it.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions, anyone? All right, if not, we're going to move on to the next item. And it's actually a bunch of resolutions, just reaffirming the appointments to the boards, authorities, and commissions. I'm not going to read each one at this point. I'll have to read them later on. So all the way from, oh boy, lost my line here. From K, resolution starting under the letter K, all the way to double E, right? So I know Wesley, I don't know if you've had a chance to review with Linda. I think we put you down as an alternate on one or two. If you have a desire to join forces on another board or commission, just to let Linda know, and we can discuss it, you know, as time goes by. But these are the appointments we all discussed a couple of weeks ago. Does anybody have any comments or questions on them at this time? Nobody's trying to bail out. Go ahead, Johanny.
Read them. Are you gonna group them like you've done in the past? Are you saying?
Well, these
Or
are
you gonna read?
consent agenda, so we don't have to vote on them individually here. I do have to read them all, so I will read them during the regular meeting. All right, okay, no other comments on that. We'll move on to the next item, FF, award of contract for the free-flowing potassium permangan, whatever, to Caris USA Peru, who was the second lowest bidder with the total bid price of $40,500. Caris was chosen over the lowest bidder due to the fact that the lowest bidder's material is too moist and clogs in the chemical feeder. The selected bidder will not have a supply chain issue as they also manufacture the chemical, whereas other bidders must get shipments from other companies. Therefore, the low bid of George S. Coyne Chemical is rejected as not being responsible under applicable law. And I'm assuming this is for the sewage plant. I don't know, Kyle, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's one of the processes over at the plant.
Okay, same with the next item, I'm assuming as well. So,
Correct.
thank you, Kyle. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? Just standard purchasing?
Yeah, Jeff, this is Marcia. I just wanted to thank the administration for the clear description of why that particular bidder was chosen and the justification for not choosing the lower bidder. I think that's important to have in the resolution.
All right, thank you. If there are no other comments, I'll move on to the next awarded contract. Again, this is for the sewage treatment plant. This is to Polydyne Inc. in Riceboro, Georgia, the low bidder for Ketonic Dry Polymer at a price of $2.25 a pound for approximately 60,000 pounds for conditioning domestic wastewater sludge for gravity belt thickening and belt fiber press dewatering. Anybody have any comments on that item? I hope not. Okay, good, thanks. We'll move on to the next item, resolution appointing EMS Deputy Chief Michael Sninsky as one of the Deputy Emergency Management Coordinators. Anybody have any comments on that? All
Yes.
right.
I just stepped through it quickly. If you recall, about a year ago, Walt Bauer, when he was the EMS deputy, was deputy EMC and assisted the fire marshal, who's our emergency management coordinator. Upon his retirement, Mike now got promoted to EMS deputy, but we didn't pass nothing through officially appointing him to this EMA deputy coordinator's position. So it's just a follow through, even though he's been assisting them for the last year anyways.
All right, thank you, Chief. The next item is a resolution authorizing conditional offers of employment to the following probationary paramedics. Be effective March 1st, Cody Rosselli, Elizabeth Steffens, and Stacy Nine. Chief, a brief comment on those?
Yeah, brief comment. They went through the civil service process for the non-firefighter paramedics and all. And they all made it through the process and are the only three on the list that we made conditional offers to them. They're going through all the appropriate checks. We're looking to bring them on as of March 1st to help. It still doesn't quite fill our paramedic ranks, but gets us closer.
Yeah, it's a tough position to fill, right?
Yeah, it has been.
All right, any additional comments on that specific? Go ahead, Johanny.
What is the probationary period? How many months?
1 year. 1 year, and they'll do about a 2-month training period before they get released, but the probationary period is a year.
All right, any additional comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the final item under the consent agenda is an award of contract to 911 Safety Equipment in Jeffersonville, PA to provide the annual National Fire Protection Association required third-party inspections and repairs to firefighters' personal protective clothing. While the cost of the services may vary from year to year, the total annual costs are not to exceed $50,000 in any given year without further approval by council. 911 Safety Equipment is a PA CoStarz vendor, and the purchase is reflective of the CoStarz pricing. Chief?
Yeah, basically, the protective clothing that the firefighters wear by the NFPA standard is required to have a third-party inspection done every year, along with an advanced cleaning and all. That's beyond what gets done in our cleaners. So it gets farmed out. 911 throughout the Norristown area, they'll come pick it up, take it, do the cleaning. And then there's also funds built into the budget here is also as they come across items that are in need of repair, they'll handle the repair right away as well.
All right.
We've been using them for the last 5 years. The contract was up for renewal.
All right, any comments or questions, anyone? All right, thank you, Chief. We will move on through the rest of our agenda. The administrative report this evening. Frank, you're going to be on to provide that?
Yes.
All right, and then we'll have Maria with the city auditor's report. We have a brief presentation from the Reading Redevelopment Authority. Ernie is going to provide us with that update. And then we will move on to ordinances for final passage this evening. I'll start off with the first ordinance is bill number 106-2021, amending the city code chapter 23, part 1201, downtown revitalization public-private partnership. I believe we're going to still continue to table this. Is that correct, Frank?
Yes, I believe next week, the administration is going to be presenting the Stantec report and the downtown initiatives. So I think we want to table until we do that presentation.
All right. The next item is bill number 5-2022, amending the 2022 position ordinance as per the mayor to reflect a change to the title of the position of executive assistant in the mayor's office, assistant, and to reflect an increase in the base salary of the special assistant position from $53,000 to $63,652.50 per year. Is this scheduled to be voted on this evening, Frank?
We can take. We're going to ask to be tabled again today until we have some further information to provide.
All right. All right. So somebody will make the motion to table that. I appreciate it. The next item is bill number 7-2022, amending the city code chapter 576, part 9, snow and ice emergency, primarily regarding snow removal in the downtown. This is the parking authority one, or what is this one again, Frank?
This is with the parking authority. I do know when we presented the ordinance that there were some questions about if this ordinance was empowering additional powers to the RPA. The administration said it does not. However, I believe there was a request for our city solicitor to review the ordinance to determine if that was the case or not. So we're hoping to move. We would like to see this ordinance move forward this evening, pending input from the solicitor to confirm that it does not give additional powers to RPA. So I would have to ask Fred to weigh in on that if he had the opportunity to review the ordinance to confirm that to be accurate.
Fred,
Yeah, and this was posed to me yesterday. I had a chance to review it briefly. Well, I guess the question is, what exactly were the concerns? I do remember them being raised a couple weeks ago, but I'm not exactly sure what the additional powers would even be.
All right, well, let me open up to the floor here. Who would like to go first? Somebody had a concern. Go
Jeff,
ahead.
this is Marcia. So I wasn't clear as far as how the signs were to be posted. Okay, whether they were going to be removed at the time, the coordination between the Public Works Department and the Reading Parking Authority. And so that, for instance, if the snow clearing of the spaces occurs and the signs still remain, then people will get ticketed for parking in those spaces. And that it was just more of a coordination piece to make sure that we're not having the parking authority ticket people. And then the other issue is, how they get ticketed. Are they going to be ticketed are they going to be receiving notice of it on their windshields, which isn't the practice right now? So I just had a lot of questions about the implementation. I didn't want to see the downtown businesses being hurt by people getting ticketed once the streets were cleared.
Thank you. That's a good question. We've learned from our first, I want to call it dry run, or the small snow event, that we recognize some of the gaps and we were prepared to close them in coordination. But we thought overall it was a very successful event on our coordinated with the RPA. But we do recognize that was the first time we coordinated very closely with RPA with clearing off the snow downtown. So we will tighten up that coordination through what we learned through our experience. Overall, I think went really well. However, sorry, let me just turn this phone off. But we are addressing those concerns. We don't intend to ticket people in parking spaces that have been cleared. So as soon as they're cleared, we're taking the signs down. And so that is the plan. And so we've learned, we did some timing from the last event, and we know to close that gap. So there's none of that taking place.
And I just wanted to say that the second time that you needed to do it, I did see the signs coming down quicker. So I think, yeah, you could see the improvement from the first snowstorm to the second event, whatever that was. It wasn't really snow, but it worked.
Right.
All right.
And and Marcia, just to the last thing you pointed out, I do recall that in terms of the ticketing process, that I guess no ticket or the electronic ticketing, I don't think would apply to this. It's my understanding is it only applies to metered and double parking.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, additional comments on this specific ordinance? All right, if not, did I see a hand go up? Hold on. No? Okay. All right, next item will be, sorry, lost my page. Right, here we go. The next item is bill number 1122, amending the city code, chapter 180, entitled Construction Codes, part 8, entitled International Building Code, section 802, entitled Amendments, letter J, entitled International Building / Fire Prevention Code, Board of Appeals, Article 2, entitled Membership, sections 2.3, entitled Members, and 2.4, entitled Qualifications, by allowing the participation of sitting HVAC, Electrical Examining Board, and Plumbing Board of Examiner members to also serve on the International Building / Fire Board of Appeals. I think this was explained to us pretty thoroughly 2 weeks ago. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this specific ordinance? All right. Just, I believe, again, it's just allowing us to use those existing board members in that international board capacity. Otherwise, it becomes a complicated process. So I think I summarized that correctly. I don't know. If there are no comments on that, I'll move on to the final ordinance for passage tonight. Amending the City Code, Chapter 70, Personnel, Part 5, Leave, Vacations, and Holidays, Section 70-502, Holidays, letter A, by adding Juneteenth as attached. Comments or questions on this ordinance? So this is adding Juneteenth as an official holiday, correct, for the city of Reading. Frank, any comments? Behalf of the administration?
It's just consistent with it's now a state holiday. The collective bargaining units are as part of the collective bargaining unit. So we're just memorializing and making sure everything's consistent. But it's an official holiday that the city recognizes because it's a state holiday. So we're just adding it to our list officially.
Okay, and additional comments, anyone?
I'm so excited that this is being added. Yeah, I can't wait to see Reading move in a more progressive to a more progressive future.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right, so that's it for ordinances getting voted on this evening. We do have 5 ordinances for introduction. The first one is authorizing a transfer of $65,000 to the council budget from the general fund to cover expenses associated with the 275th anniversary for a 2-year period. Comments or questions on this specific ordinance?
Council President, that's just a general fund balance.
That's fine. We can amend that before 2 weeks out. So then if you could just make that change, and then we'll remember to, well, maybe we should just, can we still amend it now before we vote on it? It's not a substantial change.
That's just an ordinance heading. It's not the ordinance itself.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, the next, any comments or questions again on that specific ordinance? All right, if not, the next ordinance being introduced is authorizing the appropriation of $4 million for the construction of the new 9th and Marion Fire Station from Fund 43 City Facilities Construction Fund in the 2022 budget. This is general fund money I believe we isolated a couple of years ago, specifically for construction. Are there any comments on, and again, this isn't for the total cost of the facility, which you'll see in the next ordinance being introduced. Chief, did you want to speak to this or?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly. If you recall, as we discussed the project and the funding of the project, the construction fund was tossed around. We did pass an ordinance last year, if you recall, was to move 1 million of that but the appropriation to that never got done because of delays in the project. So as we talked about this during the budget process this year, 2 of the whole 4 million being allocated to the project.
Yep. All right, additional comments, anyone? Joe Honey?
Project, if you could refresh our memories, please.
I'm sorry you cut off there, Counselor. You're still not coming through to me anyways.
Joe Honey, you're breaking up. Yeah, I don't know if your mic's loose. Check. Nope. Still can't hear you. Test.
Nope, still not.
So Johanny was asking what was the total cost of the project, I believe.
The total cost come in at, so far the budget is 10.4 million. We have 1.4 in last year's capital. And as you'll see, the 4 under the construction fund and the 5 from the ARPA fund.
Yep.
Oh, she's looks tangled up in her cord.
Johnny, that was your question, correct? The total cost? Go ahead, Johnny. You're muted. I'm sorry. There you go.
I'm so sorry. Can you
There
hear
you
me
go.
now? Oh,
Yeah.
boy, I'm having some serious technical difficulties. In any case, if you can remind us, Chief, of the total cost of this project.
Yeah, that's what I just stepped through. The total budget at this point is 10.4 million for the project. We had 1.4 in the 21 CIP budget. And as you'll see here, 4 million here under the 47 I believe it's the construction fund under the 43 line, and then the 47 with the ARPA funding is 5 million.
All right, additional comments or questions, anyone?
Quick question, Chief, when the project supposed to be completed?
We're hoping towards the last quarter of the year, November, in that time frame, November of 22.
Thank you.
All right, any additional comments, anyone? All right, if not, the next item being introduced this evening is related to the same project. It's asking for the approval of $5 million on the ARPA funding for the 9th and Marion Fire Station. Any comments or questions on this specific item as well? And I believe this was on the initial list of recommendations that came forward from the administration, which.
Yes, it was in the list of recommendations, and we believe at this point in a similar fashion to what was done with the ARP fills. And I believe it was the convention center and all that in order, since the project's moving forward, we're asking for council's commitment to these funds for the project.
Okay, Marcia, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm in agreeing with this. I think the rest of the ARP funds that may be competitive in nature that are requested from community-based organizations, we need to take a different approach. But this one definitely is a city project, so fully supportive.
Thanks.
Additional comments? Go ahead, Johanny.
And I know we're scheduled to hear a presentation next week on the ARP funds, but up to date, how, I know that we've released, excuse me, 6 million so far. So we know up to date how much more. I can't recall if we released additional funds.
No, Counselor.
So far, just 6 million, right? We've released. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, additional comments or questions, anyone?
Just quick question, Jeff. The 5 million will be moved to the capital project budget?
No, we set up a fund for the American Rescue Plan funding. It'll be spent from that fund.
Thank you.
All right, additional comments or questions, anyone? All right, if not, we'll move on to the next ordinance being introduced, authorizing the city to agree to a right-of-way and temporary construction easement with Berks County for the county Spring Valley Road Bridge Replacement Project. Anybody want to give us just a brief update on that? Kyle, is that something you can cover for us?
Yeah, the county's been working on replacing that bridge on Spring Valley Road down by the spillway at the dam breast. And there's just a very small sliver of land there along the edge of the road that they have to widen a little bit in order to cut back the bank so they can get in there to actually replace the bridge. It's very small area, has no effect really on the park or anything.
All right, so just a formality.
Yeah.
All right, anybody have any comments on that ordinance? Go ahead, Johanny.
I thought I read in the attachments, was it a $500 transaction that the county is issuing the city?
Yeah, they'll pay us $500, which is typical for this type of nominal transaction.
So they're paying us, are they purchasing that piece of property? I was a little confused when I.
Yeah, I think they have to, there has to be some form of consideration for it to take hold. So that's with why it's also the amount we use on PennDOT projects, usually when there's a temporary easement or a right of way that's like Kyle described as a sliver of land.
All right, any additional questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Wesley.
Is that bridge I used to take to get to school, and so my question is, will it be shut down? Like that, I guess that part of the highway?
Yeah, when they do that on Spring Valley Road, they'll probably detour you around the back end through that little development and then back out to where the factory is back in there. So yeah, that'll have to be shut down on a detour.
Okay, and it's temporary, so how long would the construction be?
That I do not know. They did not tell me that. I could ask at my next RATS meeting.
All right, thank you.
And Wes, just for your reference, RATS is the Reading Area Transportation Study Group. That's where they review all the county project for roads, and Kyle's on, I guess, the technical committee, and Donna's on the voting committee. Just in case you hear that name. Go ahead, Johanny.
I'm just concerned with how the bill reads, because if we're settling for the $500 for that piece, shouldn't the bill, and I understand this is just the header of the bill, but shouldn't it be more explicit to reflect that transaction? Or is it not necessary?
The numbers in the ordinance, I think that's
Yes,
sufficient.
I saw, yeah, I just didn't see it on, so if a viewer or someone who's looking at this agenda reads the bill, I guess it's not clear, but I guess it would be up to the person reading to look at the attachments. And I mean, there were 125 pages on this agenda. I just want to put that out there. I don't
Right.
know who's looking
Well,
at every page.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most clear cut, but I think it's the number, the $500 is in the ordinance itself. It's not like buried in like a exhibit or I think it's satisfactorily straightforward.
All right, any other comments on that ordinance? That $500 would help the city council pizza fund, by the way. I'm just throwing it out there. It's future consideration. I'm only kidding. Okay. Finally, under introduction of ordinances, approving the settlement agreement pertaining to outstanding loans related to the Book Boundary Building at 148 North 4th Street. My understanding is we're going to be discussing that this evening in an executive session. So we'll just hold off on comments on that at this time. We'll move on to resolutions. There are 4 appointments and reappointments. We'll be able to take them collectively together in the meeting. The first one is reappointing Cecile Grimshaw to the Reading Water Authority. Dale Eisenhower is being appointed to the HVAC Board. A reappointment of Catherine Cobb Holmes to the Human Relations Commission, and an appointment of Peter Rye to the Planning Commission. Anybody have any comments on those appointments and reappointments? All right, Bree, do you have a comment? You're on mute. I'm sorry.
Gosh, I didn't realize I was on mute. No, I don't have a comment. I was just telling myself to stop because I do have a question, but it's not for where we're at now. Sorry.
That's okay. No, good job. All right, thank you. Anybody else have any comments on those appointments?
Johanny and I do, Jeff. Johanny was first.
Go ahead, Johanny, and then Marcia.
I'll keep it very short and sweet. I mean, we have great additions to our existing boards and commissions. I'm always pleased at the level of professionalism, commitment, and determination that we have from our constituents, people who step up to serve. That's it.
All right, and Marcia?
They're very qualified individuals. And I think our nominations committee would welcome a third person to join us for the interviewing. So you get to know who the people are that are being appointed.
Yeah. Again, they meet on a Monday once a month, I believe, at 4 o'clock, right before the council meeting. I appreciate Marcia and Johanny.
Twice a month we meet.
Twice a month you meet, continuing to fill
Yep.
that role. We used to have a third. We agreed if there's a dispute, one vote, that we'll just bring it to the body and figure it out from there. But hopefully that won't happen. So, all right. If there are no other comments on that issue, I believe that will end our business for this evening as far as our regular meeting. Before we go into an executive session, does anybody have anything that's pressing for public discussion this evening? Again, you'll have an opportunity during the public meeting as well, but just more from an administrative standpoint, any items anybody needs to cover. If not, we'll go into an executive session. All right, Linda, do you mind clearing out the room and cutting off the recording and just letting us know when we are prepared to move forward? Thank you.